This is the video for the Climate Emergency Institute. I'm Dr. Peter Carter. I'm making the video October 2019. It's a particularly important video for me because this is the federal government of Canada's climate change assessment, which was published in April of this year, 2019, by Natural Resources Canada. In actual fact, this assessment shows that Canada is actually and definitely vulnerable to global climate change. And most surprisingly, particularly Canada's agriculture and also Canada's water availability. That makes this video and this assessment important for anybody in all regions of the world. Most of those regions will be more vulnerable. That meaning they will be impacted earlier than Canada. This is a map of Canada published in 2016 by Statistics Canada. It's a very up-to-date map of the Canadian agricultural regions. Agricultural regions are shown in yellow, and the intensity of crop productivity is indicated by the number of red dots. So here we are with the Canadian government assessment, and these are computer model projections as well, in this case, as direct observations. This is the surface warming trend affecting Canada from 1900 to 2016. I've adjusted the base in the report of 1961 to 1990 to make the base from pre-industrial, and the difference is from NASA GISS there. So the trend of global surface heating is clear already. Here are just three most important excerpts from the text. Both past and future warming in Canada is on average about double the magnitude of global warming. Annual temperature over northern Canada has increased by 2.3 degrees C, and that's from 1948 to 2016, and that's 3 times the global mean warming rate. This is the case in the historical record and also applies to future changes, regardless of the emissions pathway that the Earth will follow. So for Canadians, whatever scenario the world follows on emissions, the global temperature will increase on average double in Canada, the global average, and northern Canada triple the global average. These two excerpts are most important, and I really appreciate the scientists including these, because these are most important from the point of view of mitigation, of avoiding catastrophic global climate change. The quote is, only the low emissions scenario, and that's called RCP 2.6, it's the best case scenario, is consistent with holding the increase in the global average temperature to below 2 degrees C above pre-industrial. And we now know clearly that 2 degrees C is climate catastrophe. This scenario, the best case scenario, which is the only one that holds the global temperature increase to 2 degrees C, requires global emissions to peak almost immediately. That means global emissions have to decline on an immediate basis, with rapid and deep reductions thereafter. So as you see, most important. These images here I've taken from the IPCC 2018 1.5 degrees C report. Here is the global temperature increase relative to pre-industrial, and the emissions of CO2, the emissions of carbon dioxide, they have to decline from 2020 and decline rapidly, and then rapidly reaching towards zero carbon dioxide emissions. Here are the crucially important conclusions that I've put together from the assessment, repeating that both past and future warming in Canada is about double the magnitude of the global warming, and that will continue. And this warming is effectively irreversible, And so global climate change impacts, when they occur with a particular degree of warming, they are irreversible. If and when net emissions of carbon dioxide and other long-lived gases reach zero, global average temperature will remain approximately constant for centuries at about the peak temperature attained. So, if and when the carbon dioxide and the other main greenhouse gases reach net zero in the case of carbon dioxide, and this has to be net zero with the end of all fossil fuel emissions, then whatever that temperature is that has been reached, currently we're at a global temperature increase from last year's record of 1.1 degrees centigrade, that temperature will not go down. It will continue for many, many centuries. And therefore, this quote, other aspects of the climate system will continue to change even after emission stints, meaning all the adverse impacts from a global surface heating and global climate disruption at the particular temperature increase, they will continue for centuries. Drought. Drought projections show that the frequency of severe to extreme drought conditions is expected to increase by the late 21st century, and we'll look at maps shortly, the projection maps, because it's long before the end of the century. And that is for much of southern Canada, including particularly southeast British Columbia, the prairies being the main agricultural productivity region of Canada, a huge region, and Ontario. Extreme weather events. A warmer climate will intensify some weather extremes in the future. Extreme hot temperatures will become more frequent and more intense. So we will have increased severity of heat waves and more frequent heat waves. And this will contribute to extreme drought and also to wildfire. But in addition, because more water vapor is being held in the lower atmosphere as the temperature goes up, there is more intense rainfalls predicted, and that increases the risk of floods. Forest fires. There has been a significant increase in annual area burnt across Canada. Increase in the days and the extreme degrees of fires are projected, with the largest increases affecting the western prairies. In the future, higher temperatures will contribute to an increased risk of extreme fire weather across much of Canada, meaning there will be more extreme fires, forest fires, across much of Canada. And now to water. The seasonal availability of fresh water is changing, with an increased risk of water supply shortages in summer. So this is even in Canada. On to the ocean. Ocean warming causes deoxygenation. So ocean warming and loss of oxygen, which of course is occurring rapidly already, will intensify with further emissions of all greenhouse gases. Whereas ocean acidification, which is increasing very rapidly, will increase in response to additional carbon dioxide emissions. These changes threaten the health of marine ecosystems. The fact is that ocean heating, deoxygenation, and acidification, they're all occurring together, they all impact together, and the future with continued emissions is catastrophe to the health of marine ecosystems. Snow cover, it's very likely, it's certain that snow cover duration will decline across far north of Canada due to increases in temperature under all emissions scenarios. Now this is important because it's the summer sea ice and the far north snow albedo cooling effect that has an effect that contributes to the temperate climate and absence of severe extreme weather events in Canada, which allows our agricultural productivity to be so good And so losing albedo, cooling from snow and summer sea ice, will further disrupt the climate of Canada and increase the extreme weather events. And now the most important single part of the report again. Only the low emission scenario, the best case scenario, is consistent with holding the increase in the global temperature to below 2 degrees C above pre-industrial. This scenario requires global emissions to peak almost immediately with rapid and deep reductions thereafter. And now, because the Paris Agreement countries agreed to pursue and follow the science of the 1.5 degree C limit, there's now universal agreement that we have to aim for 1.5 degrees C because 2 degrees C is catastrophe. So here again is that map of the agricultural regions in Canada, and underneath I put the map of Canada. Here are the three prairie provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, with a great and a huge area of excellent food production, cereal, grains. On the west, there's British Columbia. Here is Ontario, and there's Quebec, and here are the maritime provinces. And you see an appreciable amount of agriculture here in southern Ontario and in southern Quebec. This is the most crucial temperature, global warming and regional temperature projections provided by the Canadian government climate change assessment, because this is the increase in the highest summer maximum temperature. This is always what we have needed to know, but until quite recently have never been provided with. That's the increase when it's at its hottest, and also, as we'll come to in the next lot of slides, what that actual temperature would be. So this figure from the assessment is entitled Changes in Annual Highest Daily Maximum Temperature, and this is the lowest degree of global warming of 1.6 degrees C, and the next highest is here at 2.6 degrees C of global warming, and the greatest degree of global warming here is 4 degrees C. This is the best case scenario. This is the worst case scenario that we're currently tracking mid-century, and this is that worst case scenario towards the end of the century. So the best case is RCP 2.6. This means a rapid decline in global emissions from 2020, and this is what we're absolutely definitely committed to. And this 1.6 degrees C, the maximum summertime temperatures for all of Canada are increased by 1 to 2 degrees C. When we get to 2.6 degrees C, the maximum daily temperatures are increased by 2 to 4 degrees C for practically all of Canada, just except for the far north, and the far north is increased by 1 to 2 degrees C. At 4 degrees C, practically all of Canada, the maximum summer temperature is increased by 6 to 8 degrees centigrade. Only Labrador and the very far north in the northern territories here are increased by a lesser amount, but that is still an increase of 4 to 6 degrees C on the daily summertime maximum temperatures. This most important of all information on global climate change. This shows the regions of Canada according to the temperature increase in the scenario, which will be impacted and which will be heated up by 30 degrees centigrade. Why is this so important? Because above 30 degrees centigrade, and actually below, is the tipping point, if you want, for agriculture. Cereal crops decline from 30 degrees C. This is from the IPCC. Crop yields have a large negative sensitivity to extreme daytime temperatures around 30 degrees C. And so looking at the agricultural regions again, and I put the actual global temperature increases in here for you. So this is up 1.6 degrees C. This map is Canada at 1.6 degrees C of global average warming. And at 1.6 degrees C, which we're absolutely committed to, this is the best we could possibly do. If emissions decline rapidly from 2020, this degree of global warming is bad for agriculture in Canada, because there are 10 to 20 days of 30 degrees C temperature or more. That is the temperature limit of crop tolerance. And you can see this region affects at least half, if not more than half, of the prairie province's best agricultural region in Canada. It also affects southern Ontario and also affects some of southern Quebec. All of Canada's agricultural regions are affected by 5 to 10 degrees of 30 degrees C summertime maximum intolerant temperatures. When temperatures go to 2.6 degrees C, and we are tracking that by mid-century, here we're looking at the situation for Canada's crops at a global warming of 2.6 degrees C. This is according to the worst case scenario that we're currently tracking, and by mid-century. So, of course, there's a larger area, a much larger area of Canada's crop producing best regions affected by 10 to 20 days of extreme hot weather for crops, crop intolerance at 30 degrees centigrade or more. This affects British Columbia here, it affects most of the prairie provinces here, and it affects all of southern Ontario, southern Quebec, and into the Maritimes. The rest of the agricultural regions are affected by the yellow coloration here, which represents 5 to 10 days of crop intolerant warming. At 4 degrees C, it's absolute total catastrophe for crop yields and agriculture in Canada. At 4 degrees C of global warming, that end of this century, on the worst case scenario that the world is currently tracking, and as you can see, comparing the agricultural regions, all crop regions, all main food producing regions in Canada are at 40 to 50 days of crop intolerant heat of 30 degrees C or more. That is British Columbia there. Southern Vancouver Island is a little bit better off at 20 to 30, but all of the prairie provinces at 40 to 50 days of crop intolerant heat. All of the Ontario food producing regions, the Quebec food producing regions, and the Maritime food producing regions, an absolute catastrophe for Canadian agriculture. And this is only heat intolerance. On top of that, we have to factor in drought. We have to factor in increase of toxic to green plants and crops, ground level ozone that increases the global surface warming. We have increased pests and pesticide intolerant pests, increase in weeds. Similarly, we have severe storms, we have floods with torrential rains, and we have many of those occurring together in regions. So now we see the drought projections for Western Canada. This report only showed Western Canada for drought projections, and so I put the Government of Canada 2016 map here showing the agricultural regions that correlate with these temperature increases. So there's British Columbia, there's Alberta. This is a 2.6 degrees C global warming. This is the severity index of drought. Drought starts in yellow, increased severity orange, and increasing severity red, and then the most extreme drought in maroon. And at 2.6 degrees C here in the southwestern British Columbia, we're already up to extreme degrees of drought. Drought of a severe nature affects most of British Columbia, and it's going into Alberta and even into the Saskatchewan here. That's Regina right at the edge of this map projection. Now this is mid-century at 2.6 degrees C in the summertime. Below is the annual drought. So these shows the regions that are going to be in year-round drought. And again, we see southern British Columbia. It extends over to southern Alberta and extends into southern Saskatchewan. So not only severe and extreme drought in the summertime, but drought continuing year-round. This is the worst case scenario which the world economy is currently tracking, and this is the summertime drought at the end of the century, practically all maroon, most severe drought for all of British Columbia, most of southern Vancouver Island, again the most severe drought extending to southern Alberta and into Saskatchewan. So we're looking at all of this food producing region here in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And again, this shows year-round drought, and there is extreme drought continuing year-round for much of British Columbia here, southern Alberta and southern Saskatchewan, and even going up to the northern regions there. And so in addition to the temperature increases, the very, very high temperatures in the summertime that crops cannot tolerate because they exceed or are at 30 degrees C. In addition to that, we have the obviously catastrophic to disastrous impact of drought on the Canadian crops. So Canadian food productivity, to put it mildly, is at very, very severe high risk from now on as temperatures continue to increase. This is a report that was put out by Natural Resources Canada again in January of 2019. The outlook on drought. Areas of Western Canada are already experiencing frequent and severe droughts. Scientists expect new areas across the country to be affected and drought to become even more frequent and severe. That really is a frightening statement. The consequences, as well as food production, will have far-reaching impacts on Canada's forests. These are separate quotes from the drought assessment. During the first decade of the 21st century, exceptional droughts were observed across the country. Drought is expected to become more frequent in several areas that are relatively dry already, and these include the southern interior of British Columbia and the prairie provinces, the heartland of Canadian agriculture. Also, some areas that have not previously experienced frequent drought are expected to become drier in the future, and so they will experience more frequent and more severe drought, which will be a new situation for those regions.